Welcome, everyone, to Diversifying Funding and Strengthening Your Research Portfolio. My name is Gina Stouffer. I am the Assistant Director of Research Development at the Medical School Office of Research in the Grant Services and Analysis Office. Thank you for joining us today for this virtual seminar. We presented by Grant Services and Analysis, and then in partnership with the Taubman Health Sciences Library, the Michigan Medicine Corporate and Foundation Relations Office, and Fast Forward Medical Information.
So hi, everybody. I'm Heather. Nice to see you here today. Thanks for coming. I am going to share some and reiterate some of the points that were fantastically made by Katie and Mike as well, because I think it does well when we start talking about financial scoping to think about the sponsors that we're working with and how we're working with them. So I just want to start off with saying we know that federal funding cannot be replaced. It is not going to be replaced by foundation and corporate funding or industry funding. I think a lot of this goes back to what Mike was saying is there's different interests of these sponsors. We talk about the fact that they have different motivations, that they're going after different things. And an industry sponsor is interested in I think there are some that are altruistically interested in how it will help the general public, but they're also looking for how it's going to help them. So when we talk about contracts, and Mike, I love the fact that you ended talking about the fact that, we do something and they say, okay, thank you for fulfilling that order, and now we will pay you. So I think that's a very different thing when we start talking to our faculty, or if you are faculty that are looking at different sponsors, they just may act differently. So my first kind of point of suggestion or thing to keep in mind is things may not work the same if you're used to only federal funding. So take a look at that, make sure you're understanding how that works. That long-term partnership, Mike hit on that in the industry space. I think it is also true in the foundation space. There are oftentimes that they're looking for people who perform consistently, that are headed in a trajectory that meet the needs of what they're interested in promoting in the case of a foundation, making sure that you're moving in that same direction. And that does differ a little bit than federal funding, where it is a grant assistance mechanism where you are pursuing the specific aims. And we know that sometimes science takes a left turn and we go with it. But that may not be the case with foundation or corporate partnerships. If you take a left turn, they may not be interested in going with you. So just know that ahead of time, and make sure that you're understanding in every case, read those directions from the sponsors if they have them, especially in the foundation space, because they're going to outline for you, and I have an example coming up in a couple slides, they're going to outline for you what they're interested in funding and what they expect from you. So it is a little bit different ballgame if it's not something that you've pursued before. And so sometimes foundations are interested in the community impact. We talked about the fact that industry could be interested in the impact of the science and how they can bring it to maybe a clinical application, or there are also industry sponsors that are interested in basic science applications that can move, especially products, forward. So really understanding their motivation, their background, and their history can be some of that homework you want to do before you talk about how you want to propose your aims to them. So keeping that in mind is going to help you, because also thinking about the finances. So at the beginning, Jackie talked about using Pivot to look at different ways to slice and dice the information and funding opportunities based on how much funds are available. Trying to do maybe a federal sized work statement for a foundation that has $50,000 available would be one that you want to think through the specific aims, kind of parse out a piece of that work, think through how you can then right size the work to it. So budget construction, it is a necessity. It does sometimes drive how we talk about our science with sponsors. So we talk about that we need to talk about finance because of that. The university expects you to understand finances in order to move forward with various sponsors, so that you can have a good relationship that both effects a good relationship with that sponsor and also helps the university, helps move your career forward. And you have to understand how these balanced ideas come together. And you have to be a good steward of the resources at the university. So anytime you propose a project that is about this size, but ask for a budget this size, what you're really doing is asking for an institutional investment in your project to bring it to fruition. So as you think about putting these projects together for sponsors that you may not have worked with before, think about making sure that your aims and what you're proposing to that sponsor stay aligned with your budget, and the size of your budget. You might want to think of it as Lego blocks. You might need to stack a couple Lego blocks and click them together to make a full-size project that you're interested in doing that you may have done as a single proposal to the federal agencies. So as your budget sets up its size, you revisit your aims as you write your proposal. So making sure that they stay in alignment. I do think that sponsors are savvy. So if you do propose something that is about this size and specific aims, but this size and budget, they may question whether you have the resources available, or two, they may question whether you have a good sort of project management approach to your science so that you can support it. Because they don't want to set you up to be unsuccessful and invest in you, because really what they're doing when they choose to fund you is investing in you and making sure that you're able to do that. So do make sure that your aims and your budget stay in that kind of close relationship together. So here's a case study. This is out of Cure PSP. It is a foundation. And in their directions, they put this paragraph. And as you read through the paragraph, you can start to see from a financial perspective, even beyond the science, what they're interested in. And so this second sentence here specifically says, we know that we can't fund your whole project. Right. So that should be the first thing that sets off your spidey sense, to make sure that your aims and your budget stay aligned. But they said, we are not going to cover the full cost of your research. So they've recognized their limitations of what they're able to provide, but they've also said, we can't cover an entire PI. Now, this does say entire PI's compensation. So they're not expecting you to work 100% on the project. That doesn't say they can't provide 10% of your salary or 5%. And as we go through different budgeting approaches, you have good research administrators in your departments. You want to make sure you're talking to them about what size of effort you need, whether you have that effort available. Same conversations you have when you do a federal project, but it might be sized to the Cure PSP approach for their foundation. But the directions then go on and say, we have expectations of your institution. Now, the institution does have buildings that you're doing your work in. We have administrative support in your research administrators. So the University of Michigan can meet this requirement and this expectation in their directions. And they say, we expect that there's a university contribution. So beyond that, they say, we do not provide indirect costs. So that's that bold part right after. And I'll stop and say, when you're working with a not-for-profit, we are willing, as long as they use the same directions for everyone, it has to be stated explicitly in their instructions, then we will honor the fact that they don't allow indirect costs. What we won't do is, if Cure PSP did not have that bolded sentence, we would not say, oh, sure, you can use 0%. We will use a standard rate of 20. So these are things, again, that your research administrator can help out with, let you know the lay of the land, help you understand what is and isn't allowed with these different relationships, because it is definitely, what did you say earlier? I think, Gina, you said if you've seen one foundation, you've seen one foundation. So we have to kind of work through the financial issues the same way, that each opportunity provides its own opportunity, and it's not going to necessarily be exactly translatable to the next opportunity. So when you're thinking about how to support your research across a portfolio, you may try to sit down, and what we suggest is that you first think about the entirety of what you're trying to accomplish with your specific aims. Then you might section out your specific aims, but at least you know the full amount that you're trying to work for and look for funding opportunities and apply against. And I think Katie mentioned that one of the sponsors, Robert Wood, I think, had seen a 300% increase in their applications. I will tell you that is no different in the medical school. We are seeing a huge increase in applications going out to various sponsors. That means one, not only are you competing against others across the country, you are starting to compete more against each other, even internally as you leave the university. But do know that there is a flood of applications going out. So as you think about your resources and which application opportunities you're going out for, think about how you can section off across your work, your specific aims, and then propose to various sponsors these different sections of your project. So you can see on the right hand, we kind of have this sponsor look where you might get funding from different sources. You can take that and split your budgets up. Now, we do want you to be very careful how you talk to each sponsor. You almost want to treat them like each unique project, again, like Legos that get added together to make a whole. So think about that, because what we don't want to do is have statements in proposals that say, I'm asking you for part A and I'm asking them for part B, and then I can do my statement of work. Because what that will mean is that the university will then tell you you can't, even if part B comes in and says you have an award, we're not going to let you start that until we know where the funds for part A is coming from. So you really want to use language in your proposal that just restricts all relationship between the specific aim and the budget, and say what you can accomplish within that budget. But we do have folks in the grant services and analysis team that are happy to help you work through that issue and to work through how the best way to represent that to a sponsor. So think about that. We also talk about how full recovery is pretty much imperative. We've reached a point where the university, I talk about it being a pair of cargo pants. There is money at the university to support research. Not every school or college can reach into each pocket of the cargo pants in order to find funds to help support that. So you do want to make sure you understand what financial resources you have directly available to you, whether that's through discretionary and gift funds, through your department support, whether there's a medical school-wide program or university-wide program that can help support some of the work. When there's not, again, you want to make sure you're proposing to the sponsor a full budget to cover the full aims to them so that there's a one-to-one match. I mentioned already this idea of PI readiness and the fact if you overpromise and undercharge, they might not feel that you have a good handle on how to organize your research and understand the cost structure. I will say some will see it as a great deal. I can get all of this work for this much money, but that's not the way. But if you put it in the converse, if you ask for a budget that's very large but promise very little in your scope of work, they will also recognize that and talk about that. And in the end, if you have this sort of idea of an untenable budget, if you have proposed aims, the sponsor, again, that long partnership will be in jeopardy because they'll say, hey, we gave you this much money, but you weren't able to deliver everything you proposed. So again, that could impact more your next interaction with them or the hope to move forward with them. So you just want to make sure that you're keeping that all in mind. So stewardship is very important. The university has expectations that we will support our research arm, but we want to make sure we're compliant. I think in the early part, it was either Jackie or Katie mentioned making sure you read those sponsor directions, make sure that they're looking for reasons to throw you out of consideration. The same thing happens at the federal government. The stacks of review are high. So if you're not following all the expectations, especially in in a foundation situation where they have prescribed application processes. But even in an industry relationship, if you're not responding in time or keeping them engaged and in the conversation with you, you may lose an opportunity because they have others that are also stacked up. So you do want to make sure that you are going through and, but including the university in that process. So even if the sponsor does not have a portal that the university needs to submit to, say they say, just send me an email, we want to make sure that you are going through the university process first, going through on a proposal approval form, working with the university to have everyone internally agree to everything you're representing to the sponsor. Because what we don't want to do is have you get to a point where you've sent something to them and then later it comes to the university and we cannot support what was in that information you provided them. So we want to make sure that's in place, as well as your regulatory reviews and understanding reporting requirements. I do think that there are occasions when we work with industry where in their terms and conditions, they may ask us for something or set up expectations that may not be what an investigator is typically used to if this is their first interaction with industry. And sometimes we see folks stumble in that process to meet either a timeline that was indicated that was mandatory versus a grant and mechanism assistance, which is a little bit more flexible. So really understanding what the expectations of you are is extremely important. And then make sure you're working with the support provided. So when you talk about the university, we want you to make sure you're carefully considering the costs. I think I've hit that home like 17 times at this point. But you also want to make sure you're doing the full cost of the project. Think of it like clinical trials, often when it's sponsor initiated, has a protocol. And the university has a practice of going through that protocol and identifying all costs that we will potentially run into. If you are proposing the statement of work, you want to do the exact same thing. It's an internal exercise that you're doing so that you don't undervalue your science. So make sure that you're going through what you're proposing, work with your research administrator, cost out every last possible thing that you might run into so that you're not surprised later. You may decide that there are some items that you institutionally want to support. That's fine that you don't ask that of the sponsor, but at least you're aware of what all the potential costs are. And then don't forget your indirect cost rates. I did talk about foundations and not-profits where we start at 20%. Industry, we expect at a minimum the federal recovery, and in some cases we've set standards that are slightly higher. So we cannot, as an institution, get a better rate to a for-profit company than we can to the federal government. That would put us in jeopardy for our federal rates, which is not something that we can do. So we're very strict about that these days. But even clinical trials, we've taken the rate which under federal negotiations 31% and does not cover our full costs of overhead. And we've raised that to 35. We've been successful negotiating that with sponsors. It is consistent with industry standards across the country to be at that rate. So we feel fairly comfortable in that. But do know that there are specific rates and requirements beyond the direct costs of doing your statement of work that your research administrator or our office can help work through for you. And I keep hitting home the research administrator. Here's a very confident one and pictured. They're going to help you out. They're going to partner with you. I know we have some right now on the call, so I'm glad that they're out there listening. But you're going to have informed choices from them. They're savvy. They know that things have been run into before by other investigators. They know the right people to call, and they know how to kind of grease the skids when something needs to get through the system. So do take advantage of working with your research administrator, or call our office, which is the Grant Services and Analysis Office. We can either connect you with your research administrator or field some of your questions.